we're going to have a little bit of a provocation, a reality check. There's no end to the rankings of the world's most innovative companies. We've all seen them. Maybe we even are avid consumers of this kind of stuff. I'm of the opinion that most of this, to quote the expert from the Santa Fe Institute who was in the video, is bullshit. But what do I know? We actually have a real expert in this who's about to give you a short presentation to reveal whether there's wisdom or manure in all of these kinds of rankings, and who might give you some of his own insights as well. Please welcome Robert Tucker, President of Innovation Resources Consulting Group.
Hey,
welcome.
Thanks, Vijay. Well, on that vote of credibility there for our study here next, thank you, Vijay. Yeah, I want to talk with you. The Economist wanted me to take a look at some of these ranking surveys. You know, you see them on magazines, the 50 top this and the 10 top that, and what's behind these? Let's take a quick look at 4 of them, and then I want to talk to you about some of the pitfalls and the perils. In fact, the promise of these is pretty simple. I mean, if you think about it. If we can figure out what it means to make an innovative company, then we can rank the winners and then perhaps benchmark some of these best practices in our own organizations and get better. So, well, the peril, however, appeared almost instantly after we began doing this analysis. And the perils are, it's very, very difficult to come up with a set of criteria that fit all of the diverse companies that there are in this world. So here they are, for better or worse. Number 1, BCG. Boston Consulting Group has been doing this, first of all, in conjunction with Business Week back in 2004. They began this whole thing, mostly based on a survey of 1,500 executives around the world. In 2008, they changed it to reflect partly performance. And here's their list. Number 2, Thomson Reuters. And Thomson Reuters weighs their list heavily toward patents, I guess on the assumption that he who wins the most patents wins the global arms race on innovation. And even they admit that that's not necessarily the full picture, especially in this age of patent trolling and patent prevention of the other guy from actually innovating. Number 3, Forbes magazine uses what they call the innovation premium methodology, which is basically investors bidding up the price of a company based on their expectation of future innovative results. So innovative premium, and Salesforce has come out on top for the last 2 years on that particular ranking list. And finally, my favorite, Fast Company. And what is their methodology, you ask, on this 50 top list? Well, it turns out they bring their editorial staff together, they take a quick vote, and voila, they have their ranking list for the year. I guess when you're Fast Company, you know, you got to do everything fast, right? Who needs to do research? But there you have it. So, but no, my purpose is not to bash these or to reduce these to you know, humor and
Although you're doing a good job with that.
Although I'm doing a good job. Thank you, Vijay. Thank you again. But rather to cause us to take a step back and ask ourselves, well, what does it really mean to be an innovative company? And over the years, I've been doing this for 25 years, I've come up with my own list of criteria. Call them the 5 best practices of the global innovation elite. I want to talk with you about those for just a second, but if you take these 4 studies and put them side by side, not only are their methodologies incredibly dissimilar, but look at the list of companies here. Very few make it on all of the lists, in fact, none. Apple and Google, the so-called Bobbsey twins of innovation excellence, show up on 2 out of the lists, as does IBM. And some of them, though, if you really start looking carefully, are downright weird. I mean, BCG's list going on performance, and Sony, our good friends at Sony, have been hemorrhaging cash over the last 4 years. They had their biggest loss ever in the last year in their 67-year history. And you kind of wonder why they made it on that list. But the winner, as I'm sure those of you in the room who are a quick study here probably saw, that Amazon is on 3 of the 4 lists, the most of the 4 lists there. So again, don't want to render these rankings meaningless. They're not. I think this was a very important project for my team and I in Santa Barbara, but rather to have us look at what that would be. And so let's look at these 5 best practices that I believe are essential ingredients for any company that wants to sustain innovation and not just be a flash in the pan. So number 1, let's take these one by one. Number 1, they drive innovation from the top. I mean, if you work for an organization that your leader does not really get innovation, does not really understand innovation, does not have a vision for innovation, does not get heavily involved in the innovation strategy, you're going to be fighting an uphill battle at every step of the way. And if you're a CEO of an organization and you have innovation as one of your 7 or 8 key fundamental priorities, guess what? You're not going to move the growth needle. You're not going to move the growth needle. Look at the stock price of Procter & Gamble in the 9 years when A.G. Lafley was CEO. Leadership matters. What did he do? He came aboard and began incentivizing people to step forward with ideas. He tripled the new product development rate. He said, we're going to go in and pioneer open innovation. He set stretch goals for every department and every function in that organization for innovation. And he made innovation everybody's business. He said this, when I came on board, basically innovation was a department, 8,000 people in R&D. What are the rest of us? He said, today, everybody in the organization knows that they have a responsibility and a role to play in innovation. Number 2, innovative vanguard companies that stand the test of time fortify continuously their idea factories. This means they have a process, a well-oiled, continuously improving process overarchingly for innovation. You've got to have a process. You know, a lot of people think that innovation is about the dough, the money, and it is. A lot of people think it's about the grow, and certainly it is. Innovation is probably the key way of growing an organization. But I think it's about the flow. Fundamentally, it's about the flow of ideas through your organization. The input, throughput, and output of fresh, powerful, compelling ideas that build your future. So what is the process? And if we were a team of researchers, let's say we got a grant from The Economist, and we as a team of people here could fan out, I would want to study qualitatively the process of innovation in that organization. So number 2, I love what Simon Spencer, he was the first innovation champion at a company called Borg Warner out of Chicago. He said, at some point we looked around, we had a process for everything else around here. Why not for innovation? Well, today Borg Warner has a very effective process for innovation. Number 3, innovation vanguard companies collaborate with their customers. They don't want to know just what the present needs of customers are or even what the unmet needs of customers are. They want to focus on the unarticulated needs of customers so they can think ahead of the curve. That's a fundamental reality. Amazon.com does this incredibly well. At every meeting of Amazonians, I guess they're Amazonians, is that what they, any Amazonians here today? They don't get out much, all right. They're too busy, you know, hey. But every meeting at Amazon, they have an empty chair. Why? Purely symbolic. They want to keep the focus, in that chair is the customer, the voice of the customer. They want to keep the focus in Amazon on the customer at all times, right? So here's what Jeff Bezos said. He said, we innovate by starting with the customer and working backwards. He said, that becomes a touchstone for how we invent. He went on to say in this interview, and the other guys, they start with, what is this going to do for us? How are we going to benefit from this innovation? So it's critical to collaborate with the customer. Number 4, cultivate a risk-taking culture. We've been talking a lot this morning about risk-taking. But you know, out in organizational Fortune 500, S&P 500, whatever you want to talk about in terms of the 500 largest organizations or even the 1,000 largest organizations, not only in this country, but around the world. Risk aversion is a high art. That's the reality. risk-averse behavior on the part of individual employees, which adds up to risk-averse culture throughout. Except at the vanguard, except at companies like Hyundai. Go back with me in your mind to the depths of the Great Recession. It's been about December 2008. Fear is palpable. The global economy is teetering on the edge of the abyss. If you're in the car business, your product is simply not selling. You're down 30 to 50%. And everybody in the car business, the big four at least, are all asking the same basic question. How do we move more cars? Do we need to rebate? What do we need to do? Discount? But Hyundai asked a different question. They said, why aren't people buying cars? Oh, the answer is pretty obvious. Because they're afraid in the next 12 months they'll lose their job. So they came up with an unconventional solution to very unconventionally challenging times. A one-year, no-cost return guarantee. If you lose your job in the next 12 months, you can bring the car back. We'll take the car back. Now, was that risky? Absolutely. But did it pay off for Hyundai? When the other guys are down 30 to 50%, Hyundai is up 14% during this period. They've come out of nowhere, number 10 on the BCG list. And fifth and finally, if you've led innovation from the top, if you've cultivated the culture, if you've done all of these things that we've been talking about here, number 5, you've got to make innovation everybody's business. Not just in R&D, not just in marketing, not just in the new product development arena. Everybody. IT, HR, payroll, manufacturing, operations, because you never know where your next breakthrough idea is going to come from. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you very much. Robert.
Yes, sir.
There'll be many more questions for you, but you went over time, so I'm afraid
all right.
I'm not going to give you the challenges from the floor, but except maybe not make an observation that, in fact, what you're suggesting, other than the fact that you shouldn't trust these lists, is that maybe innovation is itself moving from being a dark art to something of a science. That is a suggestion, especially in this point number 2, that maybe, like Six Sigma and total quality before it, which for decades there was a mystery. How do you make products in cars, for example, that have a reliable quality? Well, over time we figured it out. Maybe it's possible to think of innovation in the same way, moving in that direction.